some people really like when they're not at work, like they don't like to engage at all with anything to do with work. I don't really mind for things like that. Like if I get an email like asking me a question about my section or something, or I get a text, like I don't mind responding to it.
This is like
Right.
that's your fort, that's your castle, that's your area.
In a way, like it kind of makes me feel like semi-important to an extent.
I do nothing unless it makes me feel good about myself. Kidding.
That's right.
That's right. You think I'd be working there unless I had power?
Too much energy.
Hooray! You're Silverbolt.
These upgrades come with a warranty.
Blah 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 blah. Beast Wars once and for all.
Cheetor, what have you done?
I am giving this episode no energon.
What
Yeah.
are you, a Quintesson? This is no energon. Fuck it. I can't.
Sigma balls, Gary. No, not that. Ah!
Good evening, Maximals. Welcome to episode 69 of Too Much Energon, the Lasercomb podcast where we talk about Beast Wars shit and talk shit about Beast Wars. Coming to you live from a mysterious floating mountain somewhere on planet Energon, I'm The Siege, one of your hosts.
I'm NeoCal.
This week on Too Much Energon, we also have a guest host from our other Mainframe adjacent podcast, Alphanumeric, where we do this, but we talk about ReBoot, LadyGlitch.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
LadyGlitch perhaps being the biggest Beast Wars fan out of all of us on this podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
Has a lot to say about Gary Primal.
Yes.
Don't,
Yes, I do.
don't we all?
They're the good guys, right?
So what's going on this week, guys? How are we doing?
Doing good. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy
Yes.
New Year.
Happy New
we
Year.
we are in 2022.
Ooh.
We are in 2022.
2022.
Since we've 202.
I always say it that way, but it's not even the right two. Like anytime I say the number two, I always say it in the too much
Yeah.
energon kind of way, but it's not even the same two.
Nope.
I was thinking about that. the
Oh
other day.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like it's TOO, it's not TWO.
Sounds
so why?
the same.
Those damn homonyms.
Yeah.
How dare they?
It's been snowing a lot here. You know what, Siege? The last couple years, it's had big snow dumps like once a year, hasn't it? In the winter.
Well,
Or does it skip a year sometimes?
so we're doing that thing where we talk about the weather, but
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, we won't hang on it too long.
We never
So-
get snow. I like snow.
So I've lived in Victoria, BC, which if you've listened to this show for any amount of time, like you'll know that that's where me and Cal live. We live in Victoria, British Columbia. I've lived in Victoria since August 29th, 2014. And the reason why I remember that it's August 29th specifically is because that is Judgment Day in the Terminator franchise.
That's right.
So, and in kind of a weird way, immediately after moving to Victoria, my life fell apart.
Coincidence?
So coincidence? Probably not. But yeah, I've lived in Victoria since August of 2014. And what I've noticed is that every year it always snows in the middle of February. And that's pretty much the only time it snows. There'll be a massive snow dump, usually around Valentine's Day, either in the first week
Right.
or second week of and I know because I've realized this because I've been I always take pictures and put them on Instagram whenever it snows here. And for like I think like 3 years in a row, I was over on the mainland in Vancouver, like going to an event. Like in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, I went to Fan Expo, and I also went to WWE SmackDown, and like I went to Fan Expo like the previous year, and I was over on the mainland in the same time of year, like the year prior, I think for another WWE event. Um, been to a lot of those in recent years. But there would always be a big snowstorm, and that would be the only time it would snow. But this year, or I guess last year now, it actually snowed around Christmas time. Like I think it actually snowed in Victoria on Christmas, and I went to work on
Christmas
Boxing.
night.
I went to work on Boxing Day. For American listeners, that's December 26th. It's a holiday here, but not really, because employers don't have to pay you any extra money for working it. But we like to pretend that it's a holiday. But it weirdly it snowed like on Christmas Day here and the day after Christmas. But so kind of breaking tradition a little bit.
How dare we have a white Christmas?
Right? Y'all got that Hallmark movie moment with your white Christmas.
And it snowed down there too. Wait, no?
In some areas. In the PNW, it did snow. Seattle got hit. Idaho got hit. Oregon got hit. And now just today, we had a huge front go through. We're recording on the 3rd of January. We had a huge front go through. And Mid-Atlantic just got hit with like half a foot of snow. I had a bunch of rain last night. I'm down here in Georgia, so snow doesn't exist on coastal Georgia. We just get rain and then a bunch of wind.
Yeah, if there's any year, it's
this is the year where everything goes haywire.
I'm calling it. Christopher and I have been doomsaying for a year.
Do you have your bingo card set up for this year? It's gonna be snow in Savannah, Georgia in 2020.
No, I don't. We should get doomsday bingo cards.
Yes.
It's funny that you mention Hallmark Christmas moments, because actually a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies are filmed here.
Really?
Yeah. I saw a list on victoriabuzz.com that was like, it was like the 20 best Hallmark Christmas movies filmed in Victoria. There are so many
There's
of them.
many that there's a top 20 list.
There was a top 20 list. And it was a neat article too, because it told you like where you could stream them, like and what parts of Victoria they were filmed in. There was one I actually like considered watching, but I didn't. Almost. I added it to my watch list on Amazon Prime Video, which means I'll probably never watch it, but I'll always look at it and be like, oh yeah, that Hallmark Christmas movie.
At least you're honest about that.
We'll just wait till the next time I'm in Victoria, and then we'll watch it together. How's that?
Oh, there we go. And I can point out like, look at that this scene right here. I have some memory probably associated with dealing with a crackhead over there.
Big Trouble in Little China was filmed in Victoria.
Really?
Yeah. It's a very little known fact, but you can recognize parts of Chinatown in the movie.
Neat.
I
should rewatch
change angles. Yeah, they just change camera angles and like go into the Chinatown is one street here in Victoria, and they make use of that street, let me tell you.
I own that movie on Blu-ray, actually.
Ooh.
Maybe I'll fire it up after we're done talking here. There's something else I was going to bring up. Oh, speaking of crackheads, at work yesterday, I had to, we had a drunk, not a crackhead, but we had this really drunk guy who came into the store, and he ended up passing out.
Walking in there yesterday.
Well, I was there, but I was on shift, so I wasn't drunk yet. But he ended up passing out like right in front of the store, so I ended up having to phone the police to get them to remove him.
Nice.
Did he go over with like one foot and be like, hey, and like jostle him a bit?
And
Or did you not even go near him?
Or like the
A
one
meter
time,
stick?
the one time I I think I might have talked about this on the show, but I know I definitely called the Sick and Wrong podcast, a podcast that I'm a big fan of, whose shirt I'm actually wearing right now.
I've listened to the story like 3 times.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it on the show, but this a few months back, I was doing door guard duty at my work, and across the street there was this crackhead who was completely unresponsive, and a couple of other crackheads were trying to wake him up, and eventually like one of them started like kicking him, and they fucking like robbed him when he wasn't waking up.
I remember you talking about this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. We briefly sometime last year. Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite amusing to watch, but no, it wasn't anything quite so funny or memorable yesterday. Although the dude's pants fell down, so he was like lying like face down with his ass hanging out.
That's just America's funniest home video material.
Yeah. Victoria edition.
Victoria, is that still a thing?
I
Is that
think
a relic of my past, of our past?
I think it's still going.
Because I know there's been different hosts as it like struggled to stay on the air, and the prizes got less and less and less, but
Yep, it's still going. They're on their
course it
third.
is.
They're on their 32nd season.
Jesus Christ.
Right?
The show's almost as old as I am, goddammit.
Right.
Which
Speaking of, we have a birthday in the house today.
oh yeah.
I didn't. You know what?
For the sake of transparency, it is my 37th birthday
This
today.
is the first time I've said it. Happy birthday, Siege.
Happy birthday, sweetheart. Woo!
Thank you.
34, not a day over 35?
37.
36. Oh,
This
he's like, you're gonna make me say it, aren't you, you son of a bitch?
this episode won't go live until Thursday because that's our typical day for Too Much Energon. But listeners, at the time of recording, it is Monday, January 3rd.
Woo!
My date of birth.
Woo! And the world
Okay.
was great with the presence of Siege.
That's right.
Presents? I like presents.
And you have a box that's coming your way.
Where are my presents, goddammit?
I don't know the tracking number. I
Presents.
gave it.
I want pictures of presents on my desk by morning.
I saw that new Spider-Man movie actually a few days ago.
Oh yeah, you said it was hype.
Yeah, it's really, 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 really good. Shockingly so. You definitely get more out of it if you've seen all of the previous Spider-Man movies, including the ones with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, because, well, this isn't much of a spoiler because like fucking everyone knows this now, but it brings back all of the live action Spider-Mans.
Oh, specifically Spider-Man's there with the
I
spider
wish.
car.
I wish that'd be great.
That would have been the icing on the cake for you
Yeah,
if like Japanese Spider-Man was there.
yeah. If anyone listening like has no idea what I'm talking about, there was a Japanese, I think it was on in the 70s. There was a Japanese live action Spider-Man TV show, and I've never actually seen it, but I remember about 10 years or so ago, the intro to it went viral.
Right.
And I remember like latching onto it and thinking it's hilarious. But in the intro, like it's got the way the voiceover guy, like he's like singing along and he says the name Spider-Man, but it's like the way he says it, it sounds kind of like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And like
and it's
even
very super what's the term?
Super Sentai.
Super Sentai. In that, you know, he's
He's-
got a car. He
rides around on a motorcycle. He straight up has a Megazord.
yeah.
So yeah, since that went viral like 10 years ago, anything Spider-Man related, I always just refer to as Spider-Man.
Maybe if there's ever what was the animated one with Miles?
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Into the Spider-Verse. If there's ever a number 2, it would be nice if they included Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, there is another Into the Spider-Verse cartoon coming. I think it's called
So we can hope.
yeah, Into the Across the Spider-Verse or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Something like that.
Anyway,
Anyway,
this is episode 69 of Too Much Energon, and this week we have a special interview. About a month ago, we did an interview with Bob Buckley, a legendary composer, guy who did all the music for all the Mainframe shows in the 90s, ReBoot, Beast Wars, Shadow Raiders, Beast Machines. He talked quite a bit about Beast Machines, actually.
yeah, he really dug that project.
So we did an interview, and that's why LadyGlitch is here with us, because we all did an interview with him. And the interview also appeared on our ReBoot podcast, ALPHANUMERIC. But I wanted to, because we are like our conversation with him, we kind of covered like everything Mainframe related, not just ReBoot. And we do talk about Beast Wars and Beast Machines quite a bit. So I wanted to include it on this podcast as well because it's a really good interview. So here it is, our interview with Bob Buckley.
Too much energy.
We are here with award-winning composer Bob Buckley, who our listeners will know as being the musical genius behind the music of ReBoot, Beast Wars, Shadow Raiders, and a whole Beast Machines as well, which we're covering right now on our Beast Wars podcast, Too Much Energon. As well as a whole host of other musical projects. Bob, you've got a very, very diverse career. It's quite impressive. To get started, like, how did you end up getting to work for Mainframe? ReBoot was the first show that they did, so that would have been the first show that you worked on.
Yeah, well, it was 3 British guys came over to Vancouver. Because they, back then you could get points for productions if you produce something in Canada, or if you use Canadian production team, you got different points, and so you got money and stuff like that. So I think they got some grants to do ReBoot, and they set up their offices in the same building where I had my recording studio. So I heard, down the hallway that they were looking for a composer. And I know they were looking in England and they were looking in Los Angeles. They weren't looking in Vancouver at all. But I thought I'd take a crack at it. So I thought because the whole world and the whole ReBoot universe is inside a computer, I thought a way to humanize it all was to do a more acoustic score, like an orchestral score that sounded, like a big John Williams movie or something like that. So I demoed what became the theme and what became Megabyte's theme to them. And they got a whole bunch of other composers from England and LA demoing stuff. And it turned out that all the other composers thought that what would be appropriate was an electronic score, like an electronica score with lots of, with no real instruments at all. And they liked my approach. They liked that I guess they put my music up against some of their footage that they were working on, and they just liked the way that it fit together. So I got the gig, and it was just being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, quite literally.
yeah. But we had the challenge was that and the other thing was that I was moving out of my house at the same time. And at the same time as doing the Commonwealth Games and the first episode of ReBoot, I was moving. And I was going to be without my studio for several days because of moving it. So they offered to give me an office space at ReBoot, because then I think there was only maybe 6 people on the staff or something like that at the beginning.
Wow.
So I moved my studio into their offices. And it stayed there for several years, which is, I don't know if it's why I got all the rest of the gigs, because I just happened to be there. Or
I was going to ask,
yeah. But it was great because, as they were developing the show and working on the show, the staff grew. I mean, we went from 6 people to a couple of hundred people in less than a year.
Wow.
So, and it was great being able to have the music there and being able to have the different directors for the different shows come in and hear the music right away and make corrections and stuff like that. And quite often I'd make the corrections like right on the spot while they were there. So it didn't require them coming to a different studio or giving notes or any sort of things like that. I'd sort of work on it and get it to where I thought it should be, and then we would work on it together. So, it was a very sort of organic way of doing things. The other thing that was happening was that because ReBoot was the first ever completely CGI production, so they had all sorts of things that they had to do. They actually, there was a guy named Chris Gibbons, who developed the program that would match the sound of the actors, the words of the actors, to the lips of the characters.
Oh, interesting.
And he was the one that invented that program, right there. And then
so it makes the models, the character models, automatically lip sync. That's cool.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would have been, almost impossible to do. And we had a machine room that was it was huge. I mean, you can't even imagine how many machines it took to render the first show. It took 6 months to do the first show. Now all of that could be done in a laptop, but back then it required, a lot of computer energy.
NASA computer room.
So,
yeah.
But I was going through the same thing because it was the early days of being able to use computers for music, right? So I was going through exactly the same thing. I had in my studio back then, I had, probably 25 samplers and synthesizers, all plugged into a 64-channel board with outboard gear and compressors and it was insane. Now I can set my studio up in half an hour because it's basically a laptop and a couple of hard drives. Back then, it would take several days to set the studio up and get it working and make sure, all the lines were connected because everything's plugged in, right? So all it takes is for one side of one stereo pair to go out and, and you're messed up. And
Mainframe pay for roadies.
Yeah. And we were mixing to 8-track digital tape. So I would do like four stereo streams. So like one stream would be, for instance, it might be strings, another stream might be brass and woodwinds, another stream might be percussion, and then another stream might be sort of electronic effects and things like that. So when they were mixing, they had some control over the, and also in the stereo image, they had some control over where they could put things. But this was really early days. I mean, not only were they forging new ground with the show, but I was forging new ground with being able pushing computers as far as they could go at the time, and samplers being able to basically produce an 80-piece symphony orchestra, which is what my goal was,
Yeah, I find that kind of thing really interesting. Just like the early days of that kind of technology, just like trailblazing, like changing in a way, like changing the industry and changing the way things in film and music. Yeah, pioneering the way things in film and music production are done. So
yeah, because it had been the first time for it sounds like a lot of things.
Yeah,
just paving the way.
It was, that they had to develop necessity. They had to develop a lot of things to be able to do that show. Like I say, the first show, I think they maybe had 6 animators for the first show, and it took a long time to produce that first show. And then the second one was a little bit quicker. And then by the time we actually got rolling towards the end of the first series, we were doing a show every week, which meant I had to produce, 22,
you had to keep pumping
minutes.
out more and more stuff.
Yeah, 22 minutes of like fully orchestrated music. And they kept changing the shows, right? I mean, each show would basically be about a different game. So I couldn't recycle any of the music. Other than Megabyte's theme, and there was sort of Dot's theme and Enzo's theme, and that there wasn't much recycling I could do of music. It pretty well needed fresh music for every episode. So that was a lot of work.
But it's also nice that you managed to carry the leitmotifs, especially like sad Enzo music and the oboes and the double reeds, as Cal and I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Like you have that, but I can understand having to create brand new material to reflect what that particular episode is.
Yeah. And sometimes it's quicker to write something from scratch than to try and rework a cue that was for a specific scene, because when you're working with animation, the music has to follow the action almost frame for frame. So that was the other thing, the algorithms that I was using to create the tempo track for the music was changing every other bar. Like be a couple of bars of 120 beats a minute, and then maybe a couple of bars of 134 beats a minute, just so everything lined up with the pictures and the action. And at the same time, it had to sound like people could actually have played that,
That sounds like a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah. A lot of mathematics.
But
Yes.
there is a lot of like
There's
math
a-
involved. I think Christopher and I go through Beast Wars like episode by episode, and it's kind of amazing that that you managed to. There's a lot of very different music on that show in particular, like the heavier kind of like metallic sounds when the battles are happening, and then kind of like the tribal like wind instrument flute music kind of in the peaceful moments.
Cal has nicknamed it as we've been doing the podcast, the Beast Wars peaceful flute music.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was Beast Wars and Beast Machines. So Beast Wars was sort of, yeah, it was sort of heading towards Beast Machines. So there was some, because with Beast Machines, I decided to do exactly the opposite of ReBoot and do a completely electronic score. There's no natural sounds in there at all. It's all generated from synthesizers, and
it's a very very techno score. We
Yeah.
actually were shocked when we first started watching Beast Machines for the podcast that it was you who did the music in both, because we're like, wow, the music's completely different, because like Beast Wars is very like hard rock, like guitar driven. Absolutely love it. And then Beast Machines like does kind of a complete, goes in a completely different direction and is very like late 90s techno, and it's good. Like, it's really catchy. It sticks in your head.
Yeah. Well, I just need to keep from getting bored. When you're scoring like 200 or 300 shows, I'm not interested in writing the same music over and over again. And when you get onto a series, I mean, luckily ReBoot was a successful series and we had a good run, and so I got to develop themes, and the technology got easier and easier to use. I mean, I was constantly changing the sounds that I was using and buying new samplers and eventually sample libraries came along, which was wonderful, because then you actually I could do a lot of the music straight out of the computer without having to plug in external devices and things like that. So I mean, the technology was constantly changing as we were developing the shows.
On the cutting edge.
Trailblazing time. And you into season 2 especially and onward in ReBoot, I find like the music just even in that show just got even more and more diverse. Like in the season 2 episode Bad Bob, it's this very very rockin' theme, like and like later on,
I love that episode. That was so much fun.
I think everyone does.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of the most musically awesome episodes out of all 4.5 seasons.
Yeah. So before ReBoot, I played in rock and roll bands for 20 years and toured all over the place and did all that stuff. Had really long hair, and sometimes I had an afro. Sometimes it was actually dyed purple. So I went through that whole.
There's got to be pictures of you with the purple afro.
Yeah.
Please.
but the guy that I co-wrote with that was in those bands was a guy named David Sinclair, guitar player, absolutely amazing guitar player. And so he was the guitar player on Bad Bob. And I basically I had a framework set up with the tempos and sort of what were the hit points and things like that. And I just brought him in, gave him a chord chart, and I said, just go for it. So we put the picture up and he just sat with his guitar and just jammed. And that's what's so magical about it, is because there's not a lot of forethought went into it. It very much is in the moment music, So
I like that.
Yeah.
It definitely translates quite well to the screen. And later on in season 2 of ReBoot, especially, like there was the Nullzilla episode with the Power Rangers parody, and like the theme that you came up with for that was like kind of like Power Rangers like esque. Power Rangers like kaiju esque. It's one of my favorite pieces of music from ReBoot.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, sometimes I didn't get all the references. The guys that did the show were real game nerds, right? I mean, that's all they did. is they played games. When they weren't doing ReBoot, they were playing games. And I wasn't such a game nerd, so I didn't quite have the references that they had, but they would, you know, drag me in and make me listen to whatever it was they were lifting from. I mean, and then there were some shows like the one that was based on The Prisoner, which was an English
Number
television-
7,
Number
yeah.
7,
Yeah.
that's one of Christina's favorite episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was the first one I got to guest on.
yeah, I love the original series, you know, because I'm old. But I love the original series, and that was really fun working on that, trying to sort of parody the music without sounding exactly the same and capture that mood, you know, of that show. And then there was another one where they wanted the theme. It's an old radio soap opera from England that was on in the 1950s and 60s called The Archers, and I never heard of it. And one of the guys, one of the English guys, came in and started singing me this theme because we couldn't find it anywhere, and I can even da ba da ba da ba da ba ba da ba da da. That was the theme from The Archers. I remember him singing it, and he wanted something like that, as if anyone would get it. Would get that reference that was still alive. But you know, there was lots of things like that in there. There's one scene where they pan through a gravestone quite quickly, and you see R.I.P. Bob Buckley.
To Mend and Defend, yes.
Right, yeah. The season 3 opener.
They killed me off. And you know, and that scene wasn't rendered till the end, so I only got to see a graphic of it. I never actually saw my gravestone till the final cut.
Later on in season 4, you got to do the song Firewall, which is on your website. To me, it seems like it's an homage to the theme to Goldfinger, perhaps.
It's sort of, yeah, it's sort
James
of all
Bond-esque.
all the early James Bond themes rolled into one. Yeah, that was really a lot of fun, and I got to hire some live musicians for that because it was too difficult to try and do that with samples. So I brought in a couple of French horn players and a couple of trumpet players to do that. And
I think the live brass for that just really made it pop, and that's something that like electronics and synths just could not replicate.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, no, that was really fun. That whole episode was a lot of fun. The opening of it too, because I love the original music to James Bond, not so much the latest movie. But
haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's Hans Zimmer, and you know, he's sort of writing non-music these days. It's just sort of music that I shouldn't say this on a webcast, but it's sort of music that fits in and sort of serves its purpose. But you couldn't walk away humming any of the themes. You know, like the early James Bond movies, the themes were just all over the place, and they became very iconic for the series.
It's interesting that you kind of mention, oh, well, you know, you don't have the music in a lot of movies now in your head. It kind of feels like music is like a mood setter, and instead of an accompaniment to a lot of scenes in movies now, especially action scenes.
Yeah, it's almost like melodies have become a dirty word, having a melody.
Yeah.
But I have a theory. And this gets technical, but with sample libraries, like acoustic sample, orchestral sample libraries, there are certain things that they do really, really well. They don't do brass, like really big brass thing all that well. They're pretty good at woodwinds. They're pretty good at strings. They're very good at doing percussion, because percussion is just a single hit, easy to sample.
Yeah.
But the one thing that they do really well is like strings, like chunk 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 chunk, that stuff. That kind of string stuff is really, really easy to sample. Sounds really effective. Gives the scene a lot of energy. But there's no melody involved in that. It's just rhythmic. So I think that because, you know, I know Hans Zimmer and guys like that are 90% of what you hear is sample libraries. They're not real players. And I think what's happening is that they're just doing things that you can do easily and effectively on a sample library, that if you had written it for actual instruments, you might have written something different. Anyway, that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I'm gonna piggyback with that theory too, because movies themselves have fundamentally changed over well, they always do, but
Oh yeah.
action
Very
scenes,
evolving medium.
the cuts, like something that action scenes, and James Bond does this exceptionally well, is it cuts the video different camera angles like every 3 seconds. There's not just any sitting shots of people talking, or the single shot action cam is coming back thankfully. And I think maybe because of how the videos are being edited now, the music is like trying to match, and as a result there's no room for melody there, because
Well,
the
yeah,
shots move so quickly. I don't know what I'm trying to sputter out here, but
no, I know what you mean. I mean, it's true. There are sometimes where melody just gets in the way, and you don't want it there at all, because, but there are other points, especially big expansive scenes and stuff like that. Or if you've got a complicated story with a lot of characters, sometimes the music can help indicate where you are in the story and indicate the character in a subtle way.
yeah.
Well, indeed, yeah. To move on to Beast Wars a little bit. In Beast Wars, you can tell where we're transitioning to. Like even if you had your eyes closed, you can tell whether we're transitioning to the maximal bass, because we get, as Cal calls it, the peaceful flute music, or if we're transitioning to the Predacon bass, we get like a more like rock driven music. So that plays into exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah. No, music can be useful for that, for setting the atmosphere and setting the tone and stuff like that. In action scenes, it's a whole different thing. You know, quite often action scenes are heavily driven by sound effects. So you don't want the music to get in the way, because it's going to get turned down anyway.
Yeah, makes sense.
So on the subject of Beast Wars, so what you mentioned like what kind of the mandate was, or what you what your inspiration was going into composing the music for ReBoot. What was your thought process going into the music for Beast Wars specifically?
Beast Wars. Well, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was exactly what you just described. It was sort of acoustic based flute, sort of jungle type music for the one team of people, and then for the
good guys.
Yeah, for
the good guys.
And then, yeah, sorry. And then more electronic for the others, because and then that became sort of more what Beast Machines became. But it was just to set the tone. And I think one of the first scenes is them discovering the indigenous people where they were on the planet that they were, right?
Yeah,
so
they're
that,
like proto-humans.
Yeah,
on the
exactly. Show. So that was part of it too. It was like giving that world a sort of a more of a, I don't know, something that sounded more ancient or primal.
Ancient and like organic, in
Yeah.
contrast to the robots that are
Yeah.
landing on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that like organic or ancient sound, because that's completely gone when you move on to Beast Machines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where there's no trees, there's no jungle music. It's robots and cyberpunk, and it's that the wacky world of Beast Machines is very different. Christopher Siege, did you have?
I mean, I really enjoyed that series, just because for me it was different than anything I'd ever done before. But it was.
I was surprised that you moved on from ReBoot to Beast Wars, and then it was like, what? Bob Buckley did Beast Machines too? This is wild. I love the music on that show.
Yeah, and the challenge was to when you're sticking to completely electronic score and a very edgy sounding score, the thing was, how do you create softer moments? How do you create moments where there's emotion going on between the characters with that music?
Right.
So that was the thing. But I thought it. I thought it worked well. I was sad that series didn't go on a little longer, because I thought we could have done some really cool things if it had gone on for another couple of seasons, but unfortunately it didn't.
Yeah, it's a very I watched ReBoot and Beast Wars growing up, but I had never and same with Cal, like we had never really watched Beast Machines, but we've been going through it on our Beast Wars podcast, and we both become huge fans of the show. Beast Machines is great. It's a very, very, very underrated series in my opinion. And speaking of underrated series, Shadow Raiders. I mentioned Shadow Raiders, the theme song to Shadow Raiders. It's one of my favorite cartoon theme songs.
Hang on, I'm going to leave for 1 second. I think I have. I'm going to keep talking.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's getting something Shadow Raiders themed.
That's the flute that I used.
Ooh.
Oh, that's incredible.
Oh, she's so pretty.
Wow.
I had quite a few of them. So what happened was my wife and I were over in Hawaii just before we were about to start that show. We went to see a show there. It was a show put on by Cirque du Soleil.
Okay, yeah.
But it was a Hawaiian show. And they had a guy playing all these flutes, Hawaiian flutes. So after the show, he came out and he had these flutes with him. He's basically playing them in the lobby for people. He was a really cool guy. So we befriended him, and I went over to his house on Maui. And so what he does is he goes out into the jungles and cuts bamboo, and he can cut exactly the right length. He knows where to put the holes for different scales and stuff like that. And he makes all these flutes, and some of them are, several feet long, and some of them are just little tiny things. And he just gave me a whole bunch of them. He gave me like 10 of them, all different keys and all different lengths and stuff like that. And that's what and I came back from there and I was working on the theme, and I thought, well, I've got these flutes now. I'm going to do something with the flute. So that's what I used for that theme. And that theme wouldn't have been like that if I hadn't been in Hawaii and hadn't met that guy. So
wow, look at
That's
the
insane.
inside scoop. That's cool.
It's very unique too, because I mean, how many composers would go out and just randomly come back with Hawaiian bamboo flutes to use for their productions?
Well, the thing is, after doing, I don't know, what was it, four series that were all basically computer based, I really wanted to use some acoustic instruments, like, and I play a bunch of instruments, a bunch of woodwind instruments. In that series, I did start set a microphone up, and I sort of play along and try and give it a bit more of a human feel for that series. Yeah.
So you mentioned you play woodwinds. Did you major on a woodwind when you went to university, or what was your main focus instrumentally?
When I went to university, my main focus was composition.
Okay.
But I went to university in Seattle, the University of Washington.
Oh, wonderful.
But I did play in the orchestra there, and I played, because I played classical music. I also play a lot of jazz, and I played saxophone in the jazz quartet. And I have my own jazz quartet while I was down there as well. Yeah, I was playing a lot, but that wasn't my major. My major was in composition.
Oh, excellent.
And it was great because what we had every Friday of every week, we would have a different group come in to play our compositions. And so one Friday would be like a woodwind quintet, another Friday might be a brass quintet, and another one it might be a string quartet. And then the last Friday of every month, we had a full symphony orchestra that we could write for.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
I shouldn't say this out loud, but I didn't attend any classes in university at all. I spent my whole time writing music, so that every Friday I'd have something ready and I could hear it played. For me, the value of being there in that institution was the being able to go to the score library and be able to study all the orchestral scores with recordings, and having musicians, really good musicians, be able to play what I was writing. So, I mean, for me, my education was much more about writing stuff and hearing it played than it was
being a part of being a part of it all.
Yeah, and you were just there to have those people at your disposal.
I was there to use the the facilities, basically. Yeah.
So much more practical education as opposed to academic.
There were quite a few people when I went to university that did the exact same thing. They're like, we're not in it for like the academic classes that we have to take, because they often skip those, but you can see them every day in ensembles. I majored on saxophone performance in undergrad, and I picked up percussion when I got to grad school. So right there with you.
Yeah. Well, you know, and it's great. The thing in universities is you've got students in there that are doing their masters and doctors on performance. So you've got some really good players. It would be, I mean, for me to go out and approach the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra and say, hey, can you play one of my pieces so I can hear it? It's not going to happen. It's, you know, they're just too busy, and it would be too expensive. So university is the place to do that for sure.
Definitely, especially when you're working with undergrads that need that experience. Like you got your intro, you got your arranging classes, and you're making simple little melodies for, you know, 3 or 4 different instruments. And it's like, hey, go play this. Let's see how it sounds. What do I need to fix? And just rinse and repeat.
Yeah, instant feedback.
Yeah, I was unaware that that your studio was like with Mainframe, and that makes so much sense because so many shows, man, those really stand out. The computer animated shows for Mainframe Studios, but the music too. And now that you like mentioned, hey, you had that live feedback that you could go like back and forth, and oh, well, how about this? And it makes so much sense that kind of like fell together, because like you said, when you're in person and you're doing it live and you can change things as you're going, it's way different than if you were like down in LA and there needs to be a back and forth and there are time delays and maybe they don't get back to you until days later. I think you can definitely see that in the work.
Yeah, it's just so much easier because you know, I can correct something or change something, you know, right where while they're sitting there.
Yeah.
And we can get it the way that we both want it to be. Whereas if you're doing a back and forth, it's never that. It's because you're trying to describe music in words, which is, you know, very difficult. I mean, I was working on one project.
Good point.
I had the director. I was doing a playback for him, and this was a long distance playback, and I was doing the playback for him, and he said, you know, I want that scene to be more orange. And I'm trying to figure out what he means. And there's a lot of that, you know, when you have people trying to describe what they want to hear, but the only terms of reference they have are words like orange, or I want it to be more edgy. So what does that exactly mean? Because when I hear edgy, I hear guitars turned up to 10, but that's not necessarily what they mean, you know? So it's very difficult when you're dealing with language and trying to transpose for a composer to try and figure out exactly what it is they mean. And you can go back and forth a whole bunch of times before you get it right. But if they're sitting right there and you're going, well, how about this? They're going,
how about this radio play? And then he hums it for you.
It's like, especially. You think, go ahead, Christopher.
Oh, I was just going to comment. It's especially got to be hard to like trying to have those conversations with people who themselves aren't musicians or composers.
Yeah.
I like the orange.
Everybody thinks they're a composer when they're directing music, and you know, so you have to sort of go along with that too. And some of them are musicians, some of the directors. We had some very good directors on those shows. Really good.
I gotta know what orange was. Did you ever find that out? Or is it like a mystery lost in time?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I think
what is it? Something wrapped in a conundrum. What is that saying?
An enigma wrapped in a mystery wrapped in a conundrum.
Yeah, I think it's funny how people try to put very vague words into what they're trying to say, and have it associate with musical terminology. Like, you think edgy means, you know, guitars turned up to 10. I perceive it as a lot of just dissonance and clashy chords and things that make you cringe.
Yeah. So, and it could be that too. It could be any one of those things.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all subjective, right?
Music is completely like instrumental music is completely abstract. I mean, there's no way really to describe it in words. I mean, you can sort of come close. You can say what emotion it makes you feel. When you listen to a piece of music, you may feel an emotion, but everybody that's listening to it may have a different emotion. So it's very abstract, and that's what's, I think, makes it so useful to have musical scores and shows, is that you can create sort of this abstract soundtrack that sometimes can be right along with the story and support the story, and sometimes it can be in opposition to the story. And it can be equally effective. I mean, I've scored fight scenes, for instance, with very up-tempo percussive music for the fight scene, but I've also scored them with just a choir singing chords, you know, very slow in the background, and it does a whole other thing. The fight scene takes on a whole sort of sinisterness to it, when in the background you don't have all this all that stuff, but something just very ethereal and dark in the background,
Like
that
something
sort of
bad is
signals
going
that
to
something
happen.
really nasty is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, so it can work on a bunch of different ways. Music can do a lot of interesting things, and one of the things that's fun to do, and I've done it with directors before, is I'll do a scene and I'll score it, and then I'll play a couple of other completely different kinds of music against that scene, and you can see how the actual scene changes depending on what you've got, you know, what you've got in the background as far as music's concerned. So it can have a huge impact on a very subtle level sometimes.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that music tells a story, and it tells a story often, like, to me anyway, like oftentimes it'll tell a story, its own story, completely independent of what it's accompanying. Like if it has lyrics, like the music itself will tell me a different story than the lyrics that I'm hearing, or even sometimes like if it's accompanying a show, what I'm seeing on screen. Music always tells me like its own story. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah,
And
music is universal communication. So even when you're not watching it on a screen, you can still hear that melody, hear those earworms, and it takes you back to what you've seen, but you don't need that visual.
Yeah.
And I will say that as someone who grew up watching all of those shows, they wouldn't have been the same without your music. Your music's very iconic in those shows.
Well, thank you. I mean, you know, it's a huge chunk out of my life doing those shows. You know, it's like 14, 18-hour days, because it was one person trying to keep up with 200 animators. So it was, I didn't have, for about 5 years, it was like on. I was never off. I was never not doing that. Except for a little break to Hawaii where I bought some flutes. That was about it. It was very, and luckily I have a wife that understands me being a composer, because it's not fun being married to me at all. Because when I'm in the middle of a project, I'm not fun to be around, because I'm really immersed in the project. You sort of have to be, you know, because you have to be able to leave at the end of the day and be able to come back the next day and take up where you left off in that same space.
The flow.
Storyline. And you sort of can't, in the zone. It's like an actor being in character, you know. You sort of, a lot of actors, when they leave the set and come back the next day, they don't leave character all for the whole time that they're home that night. Their poor family, you know.
So actually, speaking of composing for our shows, did composing for the shows that we speak about, did that lead to melodies and themes in your future compositions for, say, for example, wind ensembles? Because you have a very wide repertoire of pieces that you've composed for, you know, orchestras, wind ensembles, etc. Because I was pouring through all the stuff that you were doing, and I listened to the piece called Code Breakers, and that reminded me so much of ReBoot. Like, did what you've done in the past influence you, what you compose now in the present and in the future?
Yeah, I think everything affects everything, right? You know, in my rock and roll days, that came to play in the animation and the music that I'm writing now. I did do a wind ensemble version of the ReBoot theme, which is sort of
I've
cool.
listened to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's not just the theme. It goes into the Megabyte theme and a bunch of other things too. It actually works really well for wind ensembles. It's really hard to play.
Can we find that on your website?
Yeah, it's on the website. Yeah, you just go under.
Yeah, I need to check that out.
Just go under concert music. It's there. As a matter of fact, I think you can even watch the music score going by while you're listening to it.
Yep, there is a score.
Yeah, yeah. But to answer your question, yes. As a matter of fact, it's interesting you mentioned Codebreaker, because that theme was actually a demo I did for another television series that never came to light. It was for Hot Wheels or something like that. So I did demo that for a show, and it never happened. So I took basically the essence of that and made it into a wind piece. Yeah. So yeah, everything informs everything. But I love what I'm doing now, because I got really burned out doing all those television shows, because after I left Mainframe, I did a bunch of other ones for Nerdcore. And the amount of money that was available became less and less, and the amount of work for each show became more and more. For ReBoot, I'll say how much I got paid, because this is sort of interesting. For ReBoot, I got $7,500 an episode, and I did all of it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I got to keep a portion of the publishing, which is good, because it was a show that was shown all over the world. So it actually I got an income from it for a few years afterwards. By the time we got to Beast Machines, I was getting $3,000 an episode, so less than half.
So it went down.
Yep. And less than half for what amounted to more work. And by the time I left Mainframe and got onto the other series with Nerdcore, it was down to $2,500 shows, $2,500 a show. And there were guys around, there were composers around that were doing them for nothing. They would score all the shows for nothing, on the hopes that there would be a publishing back end, and that they might get some money from performances.
Getting paid with exposure.
Yeah, yeah. So it got. I thought that what I was being paid for ReBoot was reasonable, and I thought that I got a good deal on that. But towards the end, I was working even harder for the other series and not getting paid as much, and the cost of living was going up. And living in Vancouver it doesn't get any cheaper. It's crazy here. So I just got burned out, and I thought it's not worth it. I was offered another series, and I thought, another 2 years of this for almost no money. I'm going to move on and do something else.
Oh, absolutely. You have to make that decision.
Yeah. Plus, I got bored.
Yeah.
Right.
After you do
mentioned,
350 shows or whatever it is, it's sort of, okay, I've done that. It's time to move on now.
Yeah, a lot of episodes of television. Yeah, I saw you worked on Stormhawks as well, which was after my time, but I knew about it because an ex-partner of mine knew one of the creators of the show. So the name stuck out to me. We won't take up too much of your time, because we've already gone over time. We're very grateful. I just got a couple more questions. So this is kind of a broad question, but what is your favorite piece of music you did for the various Mainframe shows?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I like the ReBoot theme. I thought it was a really good theme. I like the theme to War Planets, or whatever you call it. It had a couple of different names.
It did.
I like the theme to that show a lot. There was a cue in that show where the Vizier died.
Right.
The Grand Vizier of the Fire Planet. Yeah.
That was sort of fun. I think that might be on my website. I really like the Beast Machines theme. I thought that was for the time, was quite innovative. It took me quite a while to come up with that one. And there's various cues, within ReBoot that I thought was sort of neat. But geez, I don't know. It's it sort of has blurred into into obscurity for me a little bit because I've done so much so much more music since. What's her name? Hexadecimal's theme. I really like that one. That was really cool. I
Now,
wish I had a
actually,
sister
speaking
like
of that episode, speaking of that episode, did you write the Bob and Megabyte guitar duel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
but that once again was improvised, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's better for it. Like it sounds like two people just improvising,
soloing,
ripping,
yeah.
They're just going at it.
ripping at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
We
great.
had the amplifier out in the hallway of Mainframe because, and I set up a microphone about maybe 15 feet away from the amplifier, and we had the amplifier turned up as loud as it will possibly go. I mean, it was screaming, and you could hear it out on the street. It was so loud. And it took a while to do that, right? Because it's improvised, and it's improvised the picture. So you sort of do several takes. Poor people in Mainframe. I mean, they must have hated having me in that building because I was doing all sorts of crazy things out in the hallways there to try and do stuff,
Never a dull day at Mainframe.
Yeah.
Do either of you guys have any other questions?
Okay,
My
what's the
first-
dirt?
The first question I actually had written down was the process. Can you take us through the process of composing for a TV show? But we kind of just led into it just naturally. So all my questions on that got answered.
Yeah. I mean, I could speak a little bit to it. So basically, what you get is before they start animating is you get a script and you get a storyboard, which is just pencil drawings. And then as they start to animate, you'll get chunks of animation that are basically in place in the show with pencil drawn storyboards as they replace the pencil stuff with actual animation. So somewhere in there, I have to start writing the music in order to get the thing done in time. So a lot of time I'm actually scoring to pencil drawings. And as they get the animation in, sometimes the timings will change and things like that. So I have to adjust as I go along. But it's a lot of mathematics. It really is a lot of mathematics, being able to find tempos, like so that you can get from this scene to this scene, get so many bars in if you want to create some sort of a theme, and know what tempo that's going to be. And they're fractional tempos. I mean, it's not like 120 beats a minute. It'll be 120.57632 to get from this point to this point. And so it's a lot of mathematics, and it's a lot of figuring out how you can have a piece of music that sounds fluid and sounds natural, but is still catching all the things in the picture. I mean, that's the thing that takes the time. So it's very much that, a lot of mathematics. Thank God for computers, because when I was scoring shows before I was doing it on computers, it was really crazy. I mean, I had a big thick book like that with all these tables of tempos and frame counts in them. And it would take hours just to come up with the tempo map before you even started writing music.
Oh, wow.
And now it's a lot easier with a computer, because you can do hit points and it'll find the number of bars and find a tempo for you. But that's sort of the process is spotting the show, first of all, with the director, saying where are we going to put music and what do we want the music to do. And then I get a rough cut, I score some stuff to the rough cut, get the director in, we'll talk a little bit more about it. And then as the animation starts coming in, I can fine tune what I'm doing and hopefully get the music finished in time. I mean, sometimes it's like everything goes late, right? There's the deadline for this, the show is going to go on air on this date, and it's going to happen. And then there's the production time. And the last thing to happen is the music and the sound effects. So we are waiting and waiting and waiting, hoping that we're going to get everything in enough time to be able to make the deadline for the show. And sometimes it means being up for several days in a row without any sleep to get it done. And so
I've heard that nothing in film is ever on schedule.
No,
Like everything's always behind.
Yeah. But the deadline stays the same.
But you still got to go live on this date, right?
Yeah. I still have my first hard drive that I bought. It's over there. It's holding up a bunch of books right now. It's 3 gigabytes. It cost me $850. It's like a SCSI drive, and it still works. I have other,
Wow.
other drives that have died years ago. But imagine $850 for 3 gigabytes, and now you can buy solid state drives now.
Solid state terabyte for
Yeah, I've got all my sound libraries are in on terabyte, like a solid state terabyte drive, so I can travel anywhere, and they're all in little drives like that. So
yeah, like cards.
yeah.
I'm a bit of a tech nerd, so computer nerd. So like, when did you buy that hard drive? So $850 for 3 gigs.
It would have been in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I
Back-
was like, 3
It was a
gigs.
drive. It was a drive I used on ReBoot for sure.
Like,
And then
like
they
you-
had these.
that
things
like that's a
called-
lot of storage even for that time.
Yeah.
Because like your average home computer would have at that time would have like 128 megabyte hard drive.
Yeah. I had a friend
Even
in
samplers back then. The samplers back then, compared to the ones today, they were tiny.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I had a friend in around that same time who was like, oh, why would you ever need a 500 megabyte hard drive? Like, you'll never fill that in your whole life, no matter how hard you tried. It's like, oh, you paid too much for that.
Yeah.
Like my uncle that bought his computer. So times a change.
Yeah. I mean, I have an acoustic piano sample library that takes up almost a terabyte, just piano.
Just the piano.
Yeah. But they sample every note on a really nice grand piano and a really nice studio. They sample every note 24 times with the pedals up and the pedals down. You can imagine how many samples there are.
Yeah.
A whole bunch. Yeah.
Thousands.
A whole bunch.
All right.
What kind of saxophone do you play?
Yanagisawa,
Tenor or alto?
alto. I was
Cool.
listening to your piece, Prestidigitation, with that saxophone solo.
Yeah.
Oh, it slaps. It's great.
Yeah, that was fun. That was written for a saxophone player here in Vancouver, and we recorded it, but I wasn't allowed to use the recording on my website. So the recording that you hear there is actually a saxophone player from Alabama. He's a student at Troy University in
Oh,
Alabama.
that's awesome.
Yeah, very good player.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Do you have any? This is a lame question, I guess, but do you have any questions for us?
No, I mean, I love what you're doing. I mean, I love that you were the age that you were when these shows came on, and that you're still paying attention to them and listening to them, and I can ask questions about them. I think it's wonderful. It makes me feel good that there are people in the world who still like those shows. I mean, they tried relaunching ReBoot, and I thought it was a disaster.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
So,
Everyone thinks it's a disaster.
yeah.
I gave up at about 6 episodes in, and
That
I
was
think
here.
I think I made it farther than most people.
It was
yeah.
parts of it were filmed here in Victoria, and my friend was working on it, and I did an extra work. Like I'm in one single episode, doing it, and then when it came out, I remember being like, "Ooh, it's lost so much of." I won't even get into it, but it's just a big oof.
Well, the original show, the original ReBoot show, it was because of the guys that were involved, the 3 English guys. They were very quirky guys. They had that. They were from the north of England, so they've got that sort of northern sense of humor. It's very dry, but it's also very quirky at the same time. So they had that going, and that there was that humor and that sort of quirkiness in ReBoot that it needed those guys to write the scripts and have it be that. Otherwise, it wasn't ReBoot anymore.
No, it wasn't.
A good point. Yeah. And it comes across a lot, whenever we're combing through the episodes, because that's what our show is. We do analysis of a single episode. Or as Christopher and I like to joke, it's like a 2-hour show about a 25-minute children's cartoon.
Yeah, we talk about 22 minutes for 3 hours.
Mhm.
Well, it's good. I mean,
but there's so much put to it. You could just say, oh yeah, it's a kid's show, but the music, the animation, the art references, the pop culture references of the time, the pop culture references of the people writing it.
Mhm.
It goes way back. Like you said, the episode about I've immediately forgotten the
Prisoner.
TV show, The Prisoner. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like before that had come up, and Christopher had mentioned what it was that episode was based off of. I think it was number 7, Christine.
Yes.
Yeah, number 7, yeah.
I had no idea. And then
Yeah.
upon like Christopher telling me and reading into it, and I'm like, oh, like this there's a reason why this episode is so weird, because it's primarily based on like a really, really old show.
Yeah.
So I actually have seen The Prisoner. I watched it when I was a teenager, and the reason why I watched it was because the Iron Maiden song, The Prisoner.
Uh-huh.
Iron Maiden has a song about the prisoner, and it like samples audio cues from the show. And so I got curious when I was like about 17 or 18, and I was like, oh, what is this from? And so I ended up watching through the show.
Yeah, no, it was a good series. The last episode was a little wacky, but it was good up to there. You know, yeah. One day I remember I was they had broadcast that series with the stand-up comedian that does binary jokes, where the punchlines are 1 or 0, and which I thought was absolutely brilliant. But I was living in the West End of Vancouver, and I went for a walk, and this was the day after that show was broadcast, and I heard a bunch of little kids on the beach doing that routine,
doing the bit, like the 1-1-1-0.
And I thought, this is amazing. You know, it's in the culture that quickly. The kids are starting to play with it already, you know. So it was very good.
So to wrap things up, do you have anything you're working on right now that you want to plug, want to hype up?
Well, you know, my life now is quite different than animation days. I'm writing a lot of orchestral music now, which is fun. And I was just in Quebec City recording my 3rd symphony. So that's being mixed as we speak. It was interesting because it was the first time that those musicians had been out playing together for almost 2 years now because of COVID. And we had to get a very large cathedral to put them all in so that they could all be physically distanced. So you can imagine a big orchestra, and the percussionists couldn't hear the front line at all. And everybody was so separate that it really was the conductor that was just, they had to watch the conductor like a hawk to be able to play together. But, you know, because they were distanced and because they were in such a beautiful space, the acoustics of the recording are just absolutely amazing, which wouldn't have happened if we had been in a studio. So yeah, it turned out really well. I was really happy with it.
Cool. Yeah, some of the best concerts
my orchestral
I've been
music
in.
sounds my orchestral music sounds like my music that I wrote for TV and movies. You know, it's very cinematic. All my music is, because that's sort of how I hear music, is by seeing things. So it's all that. I don't write really a sort of obscure stuff. My stuff is quite visual. If you close your eyes when you're listening to my music, you probably will see some sort of a little mini movie score or something like that.
Yeah, it moves.
Mm-hmm.
Tells a story as to what Christopher was mentioning.
Well, to our listeners, I encourage everyone to go to Bob's website, bobbuckley.com. And he has links to many pieces of work that he's done over the years, and it's a treat. Go check it out. I think we should wrap things up here. Thank you so much, Bob, for taking the time to talk to us today. And we went way over the time that I had quoted you, so thank you for bearing with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's been a treat, Bob. Yeah. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for taking your time out of your day for us.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Thank you. It was fun.
All right. Take care.
Too much energy.
Once again, I would like to express the utmost gratitude to Bob Buckley for agreeing to do the interview with us. We talked with him for quite a while. Like the interview that in the episode proper, it was about an hour, but like we talked to him for like at least an hour and a half. I ended up like cutting a whole bunch of it down.
Oh yeah, he was fun to. It felt like he was getting some things off of his chest too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like he's one of those kind of chill guys. You can just sit at a bar and have a couple beers and talk about the exact same thing. And he'd be transparent. IRL as he would be over a Zoom call.
He had within eyes, like in the same room as him. He's like, you know what? Stay here a second. Didn't he like go and get
He
like
went and got
a CD?
No,
Yeah,
he went and got
Oh,
yeah.
that's what he got. Yeah.
Yeah, the flute that he used for the Shadow Raiders intro.
Peaceful
Oh, and
flute
he had a
keeps-
story about that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that-
because he went to Hawaii to get it.
Amazing.
Yeah, fun fact, just after we did the interview too, I went and saw a therapist because that's a thing that I do. But and he like I've talked about like the various like projects that we do, and I had mentioned that because this was like I think like a day or two after the interview, and he was like, "Oh, who was the interview with?" And I was like, "Oh, it was this person." And my therapist actually knew him. Like actually like knew him like in person. I was like, wow, what a small world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and anybody watching this probably already knows, but he like reached out and was like, man, I worked for months on this ReBoot like CD,
Right.
and it was never released, and it irks me. Do you guys want it? And he gave us permission to upload it and share it like with the world, and boom, unreleased, unofficial ReBoot soundtrack.
And it's amazing, like 25 years later, or however long that has been sitting like in his queue, in his archives, just waiting to be released to the world, that he finds 3 podcasters, podcasting about this shit. It's like, hey, I trust you guys to make this go out in the public. Here you go.
That makes us feel official. Damn it.
We are truly a legitimate journalism.
Yes, truly the most. Some would even say the most legitimate journalism.
Yeah, I released that onto the Lasercomb, just track by track onto the Lasercomb YouTube channel, because I was like, I'm like, well, I could put this on my OneDrive and share it, but I don't know. I felt like putting it on the YouTube channel was the best way to go about it, because then it's just always there.
It's always there.
Discover.
People can share the link.
Yeah. And as far as I know, that is the only way to actually listen to like isolated CD quality music from ReBoot. They're pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
Right?
I would be like, if he had like music for Beast Wars or Beast Machines kicking around, like that would just be like icing on the cake for me.
We would be the foremost. We would be
the foremost Beast Wars podcast. I mean, I think we already kind of are, but at this point.
Mhm.
And that's not to knock some of the other Beast Wars podcasts out there, because there are some, and well, they are friends of the show.
Oh yeah.
Friends of the show. We love all of you. That has been episode 69 of Too Much Energon. Best way to support the show, go to Patreon. Patreon.com/Lasercomb. LAZORCOMB, where you get hours each and every week of bonus preamble audio, where we kind of shoot the shit before we get into doing the shows proper. Today, at the time of recording, actually, me and LadyGlitch chatted for like an hour. So go and check that out. We also, at our $10 and up tier, we have our weekly news and current events program, Lasercomb Tonight. And also at the $10 tier, you get to pick a show for us to review a random episode of on one of mine and Cal's other podcasts, the Lasercomb podcast. We have an entire month queued up of Patreon sponsored shows. So it's a pretty diverse pretty diverse selection of TV shows that I'm really excited to get into. Next up, the first one on the docket is going to be episode 137 of X-Files. So if you want to get in on that, go to patreon.com/Lasercomb. Social media, if you want to follow me, you can do so at Lasercomb. Once again, LAZORCOMB. On Twitter, or you can follow the show proper at Too Much Energon. You guys also have Twitter, yes?
Yes, we do. At
Go ahead.
LadyGlitch. Damn it, Cal.
Sorry, that's my fault. I should have directed it to one of you in particular first. That's my bad. Lady Glitch, you have Twitter, yes?
Oh, absolutely. LadyGlitch619.
And it's me too.
And Cal, you also have Twitter as well.
Yeah, NeoCal, Neo_KAL.
You can also go to Facebook, facebook.com/lasercomb. Once again, LAZORCOMB, to kind of follow all of the shows that we do proper. I've been very bad about actually posting to it lately, but it is linked to my Instagram account, so you get to see pictures of Transformers and food and
Selfies.
selfies and
The weather.
The weather. Yeah, the weather. So all of that gets uploaded to the Facebook, the Lasercomb Productions Facebook page. But I'm gonna try and be better about the posting. I don't know why.
New Year's resolutions.
I don't know why I just did a jerking off motion with my
Better
hand.
about posting. I want posts on my desk by morning.
We will be back next week with episode 70 of Too Much Energon. 70 episodes, Cal. Can you believe it?
I not only can I not believe it, I am so hyped.
And I think the reason why Cal is so hyped is because we're finally going to be talking about season 2 of Beast Machine. So episode 70 of Too Much Energon is going to be about season 2, episode 1 of Beast Machines. I don't have the wiki in front of me, so I have no idea what the episode is called. But we will definitely tell you next week. And until then, I have been one of your hosts, Christopher Siege.
And I'm NeoCal.
And I'm Lady Glitch.
And until next week, Beast Mode.
Beast mode.
Beast mode.
Bye-bye.